Alright, so I've flipped my camera around so we can get on my computer. Alright, so let's go through the examples for the exercises this week. Let me split the screen up. That's pretty good. Alright, so we have our directions. Sorry if I scroll up, you can see them. So for each case, you'll do the following. State the IQ, list the evidence, label it all as TD or NTD. Notice, we are not going into central peripheral trace data, but that can really help with when you're defending your rankings. So keep that in mind. If you do know something is obviously CTD, I would make a note of it. But I won't grade you on the CTD, PTD distinction, just trace data, non-trace data. Provide 3 or more serious rivals. You'll want to brainstorm more rivals. It'll help you when it comes to distinguishing kinds of trace data. So I would brainstorm a lot more, but 3 is good. And then rank your rivals and defend your rankings by their plausibility. The 5 questions I talked about in the last video. All right, so let's look at this one. So, through the rain of embers and flying ash from a nearby brush fire, Herman scrambled up a ladder onto his roof carrying a hose. He must be trying to keep his house from catching fire. Now notice, not all diagnostic situations will have the author suggesting a rival. This one does, right? And that's what you'll find most reports do in newspapers or websites. They will automatically assume a rival. You can use it. I mean, I would always write it down. Doesn't always mean it's the best one. So we'll see for this case. So we begin. The IQ should be obvious. All you have to do is make sure it's general enough, right? So make sure you're not limiting the possible answers. So notice in this case, we are being kind of skewed toward thinking of him as fighting this fire because of the way it's presented. So we want to back up and make sure we don't do a very limiting IQ. For example, the worst IQs you could do only leave for 2 options, or they automatically hint at what you think the rival is. So we would never say as our IQ, is Herman trying to keep his house from catching fire? Notice, then it's a yes or no question. It doesn't leave it open for all the possible causal stories that you would want to tell. So we're going to make this very general because notice, what he might be doing might have nothing to do with the fire. So we're going to say something general, although it's still about Herman. So I'll simply say, what is Herman doing? Oops, sorry. General. Now we know it's about Herman, but notice we want to include all his behavior. Because notice he's scrambling around up his ladder carrying a hose. We don't want to write all those details in our IQ, so we know what we're getting at. What is Herman up to? What is Herman doing? Now, immediately, like I told you before, is don't stop your brain from brainstorming rivals. So if rivals pop in your head, write them down because that's the more natural thing to do. It's more cryptic or more forced to go through the evidence. So, and your brain saying the rivals is actually showing you how your brain is handling the evidence at the same time. So it's totally reasonable and even encouraged to constantly go back and forth between rivals and evidence. So these 2 steps, list and label evidence rivals, should be a back and forth thing, including, big tip, do not start labeling your evidence until you have a good list of rivals. That will help the labeling go a lot easier. Because remember, we are going to use the trick of the why is it the case that question, and that will require looking at your rivals to see if they are trying to provide for that piece of evidence. Already in the story, we have one rival provided for us. Always at least put it down, even if it's not going to be your finalist. Good? So what I always recommend doing is creating a little brainstorm list. You can decide your final rivals you want to consider later, but let your brain go wild and write down a number of rivals even if you think they aren't serious. So let's start with preventing house from fire. What else could we say? Maybe he is fighting the fire. He's not watering down his roof. He's actually pointing at the fire and he's getting ready to fight it. Really stupid idea. To be clear, what direction does fire go? Up. and then it follows the wind, but it always wants to go up. Being on a roof with a little teeny garden hose? No. Really bad idea, but maybe that's what he's doing. What else could he be doing? Please let your brain run free. I'm going to say that he is playing fireman. Notice, he's not actually fighting the fire. He's just pretending that he's a fireman, going up and down ladders with his little hose. He's not really going to try to fight the fire. It's just a game he plays because firefighters are his heroes. Fine. What else? Maybe he is cleaning his rain gutters. Maybe he sees that ash in the air and he thinks, oh, I've got to clean that right away. That's something my dad would have done. What else? Maybe he's going to go work on his swamp cooler. Maybe he's watering plants. Maybe there's some plants on his roof or on a ledge that overhangs and he finds out it's most efficient to water them from the roof. Come on, just let it go. What else could it be? Maybe he's going up there for tanning. Now, of course, you're saying, why is he carrying a hose? When you're tanning, you get thirsty. Duh. Whatever. Just let these go. Let's think. Watering plants. Maybe there's other sorts of cleaning. Like maybe he's going up there to clean his roof. Sure. Anyway, just let yourself go brainstorming all these possible rivals. And I would make a little list off to the side. Okay. Now that we have a brainstorm list, now we can go back and forth, keep writing rivals if you come up with them, but start listing your evidence and then make sure you have a great brainstorm list before you label. All right, so what do we have? We have a rain of embers and ash. Good, we have a nearby brush fire. What do we have? We have Herman scrambling. Now notice, I'm going to separate Herman scrambling from where he's scrambling to, just in case those might have different stories to tell. So now I'm going to say H for Herman, going up ladder. H, Herman, going onto roof. And what do we say? Carrying a hose. Shorthand is fine as long as it's clear that these are distinct pieces of evidence. All right, we're doing fine. Okay, good. Any more brainstorm rivals? I hope you're coming up with new ones. Those are all the ones I'm really considering that I could really imagine being true. People are crazy, so I'm even going to think that playing firemen might be happening here. All right. From our brainstorm list, we can now use our shortcut trick for determining what is trace data and what's not. We ask, why is it the case that, and fill in each piece of evidence and look to see if that is what our rivals are trying to explain. Why is it the case that there's a rain of embers and ash in the air? Is that something our rivals are trying to explain? Now be careful. Don't get the question backwards. Don't say to yourself, is that something that the rivals are answering or relevant to? Ask, are they trying to account for it? Does preventing your house from fire explain a rain of embers and ash? No, it goes the other way. Rain of embers and ash helps why he would be preventing his house from catching fire, but preventing his house from fire doesn't explain the presence of embers and ash. To be really clear, let's try to answer that question and give it a rational answer and see if that is included in any of our stories, because it isn't. Why is it the case that there's a rain of embers and ash? Because there's a nearby brush fire. We know the answer to this question, so for our diagnostic, it's non-trace data. It's background. Now, could we start a different diagnostic and ask, why is there a nearby brush fire? Or why is there a rain of embers and ash? Sure. But right now we're asking about Herman, and the raining embers and ash are background to his case. Why is there a nearby brush fire? Again, are the rivals talking about lightning, arson, fireworks? No. They're talking about explaining Herman's behavior, so this is background. The fire is relevant to these things, but the rivals aren't trying to explain why there's a fire. Unless you're telling some crazy story like this is a real case. There were some young men who were trying to get into the fire academy, so they started a fire on purpose so that they could get famous for fighting it, and they thought that would get them into the fire academy. So notice, could be a crazy story where it's really an arson story, but fighting the fire at the same time. Not our case. All right. Why is it the case that Herman is scrambling around, including going up a ladder? Is this something we are trying to explain? Yes, it is. Some of these rivals would very clearly explain why he's rushing around. Some of them might not, so notice. I am not asking you to distinguish between peripheral and central trace data, but notice that the way we just articulated that tells you that this is peripheral. We might not be able to explain why he's scrambling, but we should try, but it might not be the most central piece of trace data. It might not be incredibly essential. Probably peripheral. Why is it the case that Herman's going up a ladder? Now let's look. All of these are trying to explain why he's going up a ladder. Trace data, probably central trace data. Why is it the case that Herman's going onto his roof? All of these stories are trying to explain that. That is trace data, probably central. Why is it the case that Herman is carrying a hose? Again, very much in these narrative causal stories, trace data. Now, is it central? Seems to be central, unless you take tanning as a serious story. Probably shouldn't. So this is probably central as well. It's an issue. But again, just asking for central and just asking for TD versus not trace data, we've got it. So now let's decide which rivals we are going to consider as serious. I think the preventing house from fire is good. That is the author's rival, and this author is pretty decent. Preventing house from fire. Now, remember what we said about there being a certain skill to creating rivals. You don't want rivals that overlap, and you also want to group them into stories. For instance, I think cleaning rain gutter, swamp cooler, watering plants, cleaning roof are serious rivals. But I think for these purposes here, where we only have 3 rivals, we're not going to spend hours on this one case. I think I'm going to create a larger group and call it chores, such as cleaning, swamp cooler, and I'm going to make little notes like this, just so I know what I'm considering. So I think chores would be a good slice or a good grouping of rivals. And that way it has real consideration. It's not so small that its likelihood gets lost in what seem like more popular or more likely stories. Good? Sorry, capitalizing Alex on. What do you think? The really stupid thing of fighting the fire or the crazy fetishistic playing fireman? Yes, we have a bunch of stupid people that would try to fight a fire, a brush fire, with their hose and going on their roof to get a better angle. Oh my gosh, that is so stupid, but people can be stupid. All right, so we'll take that as our 3 cases that we're going to consider. So lastly, I asked to please rank and articulate your rivals. You might change your mind as you go. It will be very common that I'll be grading these and I will see you reversing, changing your mind at the last second, crossing this out and saying, no, this should be second. Completely understandable. As you start to articulate the evidence and relevance, you might change your mind. But I think this case is going to be straightforward. I think C1, right, and just to remind what that is, I think the preventing the house from fire probably will be our strongest rival when we consider everything. Then I would think, yep, I'm going to go with the stupid thing of fighting the fire as our second rival, because that is how stupid people are that I see. And so that means C2, the chores rival, is going to be third. Again, we could change our mind as we get further along and see this evidence, but so remember what we want to consider. What rival explains the most important trace data well and likely? What rivals explain the peripheral or less important trace data well and likely? And are they hurt or helped by the NTD? So let's go. Preventing house from fire. How does that do? Does that explain the most important trace data, the going up a ladder and going onto the roof? Yes. And so notice what we would say. It explains, and now notice how easily we can do this. We can do this in shorthand if I could learn how to type. It explains 3 and 4 well and likely. Got it? If you are preventing your house from catching fire, watering down your roof makes sense. Now, can it explain the not as essential scrambling behavior in carrying a hose? Absolutely well, right? So we could say that also explains, and notice we numbered it right away, right up there. So we can say explains 3 and 6 well. And what should we say about that? We would say that is typical behavior for the panic of a fire situation. Right? You are going to be carrying a hose and you're going to be scrambling because hopefully you're smart enough to know that you need to flee if this fire gets any closer. Great. Now, is it helped or hurt by the NTD? The NTD, rain of embers, brush fire, what would we say? And helped a great deal by the fire and the threat of embers in the air. Now you can also say, I would hurt a bit by how dangerous and stupid this is if the fire is close. Don't you wish we knew exactly what the author meant by nearby? If they meant nearby, like 100 yards away, then oh my gosh, this is stupid, and the nearness of it hurts this rival. Any smart person wouldn't be on their roof if a fire's that close. Fine. Good. But seems like a pretty strong rival. C3, fighting the fire. Can this explain scrambling up a ladder, going onto your roof, carrying a hose, all of this? Yes. What would we say? Yes, this is stupid, and that makes it less likely. The irrational thing is always going to be less likely than the rational thing. And that makes it less likely. Yes, this is stupid, and that makes it less likely. But, right, 2 through 6, right, are explained by this stupid effort, right, of fighting the fire. You need a hose, and firemen go up high on their ladders, so he's going up high on his roof, pretending to be a fireman. Now, he's not playing the fireman game. I still really like that rival, but very stupid, but it does fit this stupid story. Is this helped or hurt by the NTD? Both, right? This is helped by the embers and fire, but that also makes it incredibly stupid. Fire goes up, you will get trapped on your roof. But some people are stupid and will risk their lives to protect their homes. I mean, what do you call arsenals of weapons to be used against people that might trespass on your property? People are stupid about protecting their homes. Good. Me? I would rather not get in a gunfight and just help the robber take my TV set. I think that's a smarter choice. Feel free. Here is my old PlayStation. Here is my computer. Let me help you carry that to your car if we both put our guns down. Whatever. All right, sorry. Chores. Now, what would you say here? Now I think it'll be obvious why this is the least strong of the rivals. So what do we say? Can it explain the most important trace data, the scrambling and going up a ladder? Not the scrambling, right? So no, doesn't explain scrambling. I mean, they're chores. Most people don't scramble to get chores done. But explains what? The going up a ladder onto the roof carrying a hose, but explains 4 through 6. Well, this is typical for these chores. And notice, the likelihood does okay because we group them together, right? We do see people doing all these sorts of chores, so we group them together, and there's a certain likelihood or plausibility here. Okay, so notice, I'm going to be really careful, and I'm going to make sure that we understand scrambling is our third piece of evidence. Number 3, scrambling behavior, but explains the rest well. Now, is this helped or hurt by the NTD? Sorry, my mouse is freaking out. Is this helped or hurt by the NTD? Please? Hurt. Hurt thoroughly. Hurt a ton by the NTD. Why is this freak doing chores when there is a risk of fire? Hurt a ton by the NTD, there's a nearby fire, and there's embers in the air, and dude is doing chores. That really drops the likelihood of this rival. Do you see how this is done? Good. Oh no, I just realized I forgot to stop you from watching these videos until you try these on your own. You better. If you haven't yet, stop this video. I am going to hack into your system right now and make this video pause. Try the next examples, come back, and I'll show you how I would do them. Please try them on your own so you don't get a false sense of that these are so easy and all of that. I want you to see the difficulty by trying on your own first. Pause. Go do that. All right. Welcome back. Here we go. So with this example, I'll go a little quicker. I won't write down everything I'm saying. I'll abbreviate a lot just so this video doesn't take you over an hour and a half to get through. I am so sorry. So now we have a famous case in my history of teaching, the Waldo case. Okay, this is a true story. Waldo the turtle is missing. He must have gone out of the garden's fence because he always tries to dig under it or climb over it. We have found him after he escaped before. Turtles like Waldo do bury themselves in the ground when they sleep, including when they hibernate. Callie dug all around in the garden and didn't find him buried in any of his usual sleeping spots. So, I've set out our little paradigm on the page here, and so the IQ. Now, I did not purposely create this just to trick you. That is just a great coincidence. No, the IQ is not Where's Waldo. Yes, those are great books, great literature, but that is not our IQ. Why? Because we want to know a lot more than just where he is. For example, let's say we answer the IQ. Waldo is in a dumpster. That doesn't tell us the story. We want to know how he got there. Good? So, another question, a more broad question you could ask that won't limit it. It's not as adorable, but we could simply ask, why is Waldo missing? We don't want to ask, is Waldo dead? We don't want to ask if Waldo got out. because we don't know. We want to leave it open to possible stories. Why can't we find Waldo? What happened to Waldo? Not just where. We want to know more. All right. So then I said what you should always do is brainstorm rivals. Let your mind go crazy. Now notice, there is one already implied, or actually stated pretty directly in here, and that's an escape story. He climbed or dug out. Good. What's another brainstorm story? How about he's still hidden in garden? Right? Maybe he's buried in a new spot. Now there's escape stories. What about predator stories? That he was taken by a dog, a coyote, a hawk, right? Terrible things. I am putting on a brave face and saying this while not being sad. Okay, Waldo was a sweet little turtle. What else? Maybe he was stolen. Now notice, could there be overlap between predator and stolen? We'll make sure there isn't by saying predator meaning animal and stolen meaning human. Good. So a human stole him. Or what about borrowed? Now, I could give you more background and say at this time I was teaching at UC Riverside and we were living in family housing right next to campus, and there was tons of little kids in the little neighborhood and they would sometimes play with Waldo. So that would make sense, right? Maybe one of the neighbor kids took Waldo out of the little garden and brought him over to his house or around the corner or something. Maybe, right? So given that extra gust, now what would that be? Non-trace data. Where we live, the kids, the neighborhood kids would play with the turtle. Fine. Good. Let's see. Is that a good list? Yeah. Everything else I'm thinking of are sub-stories, like stolen in order to be sold on the black market to be turned into a handbag. Or I don't know what you people do with animals. I don't eat them very much, but you guys just mutilate animals for fun or whatever. All right. I think we've got a good list, so now we can list all our evidence, and I'm going to abbreviate a bunch. So Waldo missing, and each piece I'm going to keep separate. Now notice, the author says he must have gotten out of the garden's fence. Notice, that's a rival, that's not evidence, but we can say this, right? Lives in garden fence. That's implied in that rival, and so that must be where he lives. Now notice, this other behavior I think should be included. He always tries to dig out and also tries to climb out. Different behavior, maybe you could put those together. I separated them. It's always safe to separate. And so what do we say? We found him after escaping before. Good. And 6, what do we have? Turtles bury themselves for sleep, hibernation. Let's see, 7. What do we say? Kelly dug all around. And we know that means looking for him. We know that's implied. I'll put that in parentheses just so it's clear that that's implied. And 8, he's not in his usual sleeping spots. Actually, I will say W, not too sure if he's male or female, sorry. W, I can't remember. W, not in his usual sleeping spots. All right, clear. There we have our evidence. Did we brainstorm enough? Remember, we don't want to label until we're sure we have all the rivals we might want to consider as serious, as real stories that could account for answering the question, explaining the evidence. I think that's good. I can't think of any others. Can you? I think it's good. So, since we have a good brainstorm list, now notice, this process would take you normally longer. I've thought about this case a lot, so I brainstorm quickly, but that should really be a back and forth case as you're listing evidence. But again, make sure you finish a good brainstorm before you try to label. So, We ask of each piece of evidence, why is it the case that? Why is it the case that Waldo is missing? Is this something our rivals are trying to explain? Absolutely. And we know that's CTD. That is the evidence we have to explain, or you aren't a rival that is serious at all. Why is it the case that Waldo lives in the garden fence? Our rivals aren't trying to explain that. It is relevant, but they're not trying to explain why he lives where he does. Why does he live there? Because we are let's answer the question. If you have an NTD and you're not sure where it goes, answer it. Ask why is it the case that, answer the question, and see if that sounds like one of your rival stories. Why does Waldo live in the garden fence? Because we are dream turtle owners. We don't put him in a cage. We don't even keep him inside unless it's, really dangerous wind out there. Then we bring him in. But he has a garden full of food and places to dig. He has the best life. Little jerk always tried to escape. Animals should be free. But for a pet, he was treated really well. Why is it the case that he always tries to dig out? Notice, very much apropos of the case we're considering, but are we trying to explain what he does in the past? No, we're not trying to explain his past behavior. We're trying to find out why he's missing now. So what he does before is not something we are trying to explain, but it's very relevant background. He tries to climb out. Again, we are not trying to explain what he does, but does that make it more likely that he will do it again? Sure. For example, let's say you're looking at a case of a bank robbery, and you ask, how was the bank robbed? Or maybe you even know, who could have committed this bank robbery? And then you've got the story that said, Stan robbed a bank before. Now, we're not trying to explain why Stan robbed a bank before. We're trying to explain who robbed this bank, but that is interesting background. It makes Rob a more likely candidate. Good. So this increases the likelihood of the escape stories, but we're not trying to explain why he did it before. We have found him after escaping before. Are our rivals trying to explain why we found him after past escapes? No. Answer the question. Why is it the case we found him after he escaped before? Because turtles are stupid and they're not very fast. They're actually pretty fast, but not for a human. And also, sorry for the tangent, turtles have absolutely terrible proprioception. Okay, let me explain. Proprioception is your ability to sense your body even when you're not directly experiencing it. For example, I can put my hand behind my back and I can hold up 2 fingers even though I don't feel anything. I just know that that's how my fingers are replaced using my 6th sense of proprioception. Look, I'm right. I was holding up 2 fingers. Turtles have the worst conception of their body's comportment in the world. So you will find turtles, here's our little turtle, there's his little head. You will find a turtle hiding under a wall with just his head under the wall, and he thinks he's hidden. His shell is sitting out in the open, and he really thinks no one will find him. You know who else is like this? Stupid human babies. Have you seen stupid human babies drop a toy under a chair? So they drop their little toy under some chair legs, and they will literally just ram their head against the chair legs, trying to get to their toy because they don't understand the size and shape of their head. It's the best. Sorry. You learn proprioception as you get older. Sorry. 5. We found him after escaping before? No. We know why we found him. We got lucky. He's stupid. We're not trying to explain that now. Why is it the case that turtles bury themselves for sleep or hibernation? Not our stories. We are not trying to explain turtle instincts. What is the answer to this question? Instincts to regulate temperature, to protect themselves while they're asleep. We are not trying to explain turtle behavior in general instinct. Why is it the case that Kelly dug all around in the garden? Is this something we are trying to explain? No. We know the answer to that question. She's looking for Waldo. That is not part of our story. She's looking for Waldo. We know why she dug all around. It's not a mystery we're trying to explain. Why is it the case that Waldo is not in his usual sleeping spots? Sorry for the automatic check stuff. I hate that. What about this one? Are these stories trying to explain why he's not in his usual sleeping spots? Yes, they are. Notice, even this still hidden in garden, notice what we automatically want to say because of this, because we know it's important. We want to say in new spot or in usual spot, because we're going to try to explain why he's not in his usual spots. That's why Kelly looked all around, and so this does need to be. Now you could argue it's automatically explained without trying, but these stories do explain why he's not in his usual sleeping spots. Why is he not in his usual sleeping spots? Why is that the case? Because he escaped. Because he's in a new spot. Because someone, okay, this is hurting my feelings, took him, stole him, borrowed him. All right, fine. Good. We've got it. So we've labeled all our evidence. Now let's decide on some rivals. And again, right now you're just listing them. You will rank them below. What are we going to say? I think clearly the escape story deserves real consideration. Let's think. And now notice you're relying on your guess for likelihood. Like, sadly, predator is fairly likely. I think you know plenty of cases where yourself or people you know have dogs or cats that are taken by coyotes or whatever. And by the way, more background, Gus, we do live at the foothills of some of the San Bernardino Mountains, so we're pretty close to a native area. Let's think. What's more likely? Borrowed or stolen? Let's put hidden in a new spot. Again, doesn't have to solve the case, right? Hidden in new spot, still in garden. I'm going to put that just for interest's sake. You'll see why. Good. Now, the other ones could have been great rivals as well. Stolen, borrowed, especially with the extra Gus, extra background I gave you about the kids borrowing him, would have been nice. But if we were doing that, I would have included a ninth piece of evidence. Neighborhood kids have a history of borrowing Waldo. So we'll leave it at these. All right. Now, here is where I am just going to talk through this instead of writing everything out, just so this video doesn't take super, super long. So, I think the first one is the escape story. I do think that has the most promise. So this is C1, the escape story. Again, your order up top doesn't dictate this order. That's why I write it out this way. What should we say? That turtle digs so much that I'm going to say C3, hidden, is in second place. And then C2, oops, sorry. C2, predator, good. Now, if this was a little cat, right? Predators love cats. I don't think they like turtles as much. But still, maybe you have more Gus, and you could give me a really compelling case that this is a predator story because it's so likely in your experience. All right. The escape story. What is the most important trace data? 1. What is the second most important or probably peripheral trace data? 8. So let's talk. First, how well and likely does it explain Waldo being missing? It explains it perfectly well. He's missing because he's out of the garden somewhere, and so that's why we can't find him. Is this a likely story? Yes. This is very likely, and I would write this. I would say likely because of the NTD that shows that he does this from time to time, and he's constantly trying to escape. So this is a very good explanation and a likely explanation for 1, and the NTD in 3, 4, and in a way 5 helps this rival quite a bit. Now, does it explain 8 well? Yeah, it explains 8 automatically. It's an easy explanation for 8. He's out of the garden, so he's not in his usual sleeping spots. Helped or hurt by the NTD? It is helped by all the digging he does, and it's again helped in its likelihood by 3 and 4 and kind of 5 because it shows that he does this before, so that increases the likelihood. The NTD helps a lot because what does it show? It makes it less likely that he's still hidden in the garden. So it hurts C3, and so by contrast helps C1. Good? So to make that quick, I am going to pause the video and fill in that answer so that if you want to, you can pause the video and you don't have to wait for me to type. All right, welcome back. So see, if you want to pause the video, look at that explanation of what I've given there. And if you want to write any of it down or copy it over, great, right? I just didn't want to have you sit there and wait while I type. The next ones I will just do out loud. You can see the nature of how I would explain things. Again, most important trace data first, peripheral trace data second, and then discuss whether NTD helps or hurts. C3, I say, is second. Still hidden in garden. Does it explain why Waldo is missing? Yes. We just can't find him, and that explains why he's missing. And notice, this is helped by the fact that he digs a lot and buries himself for sleeping and hibernating. Good? So, let's go carefully one at a time. It explains one very well and very likely, especially because of his digging behavior. Does it explain why he's not in his usual sleeping spots? That gets a little tricky. We would assume that he would most often be in usual spots, so that makes this a harder explanation. There's an explanatory hurdle right there, because that's going to be tough. Why would he do something unusual? It just makes it less likely. Now, is this helped or hurt by the NTD? We were mentioning it before. It is helped by all his digging behavior. It is hurt by the fact that he has escaped before and tries to climb out, but all of the digging makes him being hidden deep in the garden soil somewhere a little more likely. But is it also hurt again? Yes, hurt again by 7. Helped by the hibernating 6, but hurt by the fact that Kelly looked all around. We wish we knew how thoroughly, because if it was incredibly thorough, then that makes this C3 rival more unlikely. All right, again, we'll go on, right? Please pause if you want to make notes, but I don't want to make you wait too long. C2, Predator. Can the C2 Predator story explain Waldo being missing? Of course. If a predator has them, hopefully just playing with them and not killing him or eating him, please, then it explains why Waldo is missing. Is this a likely story? Fairly likely. Predators do take pets quite a bit, and I said that the extra NTD, we are kind of close to a kind of wilderness area, so the likelihood is pretty good. Does it explain why he's not in his usual sleeping spots, the trace data in 8? Yes, if a predator took him out of the garden, he's not in his usual sleeping spots. Is it helped or hurt by the NTD? It's neither helped nor hurt. I mean, I guess you could say that maybe he escaped and a predator took him, right? So this is a weird kind of combo overlapping rival story, but not really helped or hurt by the NTD, and that's part of the reason why I don't think this story is as likely. But again, I think C3 and C2 are pretty close, but the escape story is far and away the strongest rival. In fact, so much so that I would like to make a little remark about it. I would say this is the strongest rival by a good margin. And notice, we can only say that after we've really considered the other rivals. The other two, pretty close together. You might even want to mention that if this was the test. Do you get it? All right. I hope you don't mind me going that quick from now on. Next one. Potter. True story. Ivan Potter died last night in a car accident. On his way home from work, Mr. Potter's car crashed through a freeway guardrail and rolled down a soft embankment into a shallow stream. Examination of the corpse at the crash site, by a qualified physician revealed no broken bones or external injuries. There was also no sign of skidding or swerving on the road leading up to the guardrail. IQ. What is the question that we are trying to answer? Now notice, some of you monsters are going to ask, why was there a car accident? Please, come on, people. What is more important, the car accident or Potter? Good, right? So what we want to ask is, how did Potter die? And notice, that will probably give us an answer to what caused the car accident, but the death is the more important case. But the car accident is a correlation at least. They probably had something to do with each other, but the death is the most important question we have to answer. Good. So now what do? We go down and we immediately start brainstorming. Good. What do we say? So we could say that this is what? We could say this was driver failure. That he missed a turn, he was going too fast, it was foggy. Doesn't say it was foggy, but maybe it was dark. Good. Driver failure, he missed a turn. Now notice, we want to be careful to distinguish driver failure between, how about this? Fell asleep. Now notice how we're getting an overlap problem. Wouldn't fell asleep be a form of driver failure? Yes. So what we want to say, we want to distinguish these. So we'll say driver failure, not asleep, from the fell asleep rivals. Good? So that is missed a turn, driving too fast, or fell asleep is a different set of driver failure rivals. What about that? What about mechanical failure of the car? It wasn't driver failure, the brakes just stopped working. Wasn't his fault, he wasn't driving too fast, just power steering locked up, something like this. Rear differential locked up, whatever. Clear? What else should we consider? Because we watch too much TV, we've got to put in a murder case. We've got to put in a suicide case. Too much. America's weird. Now notice what's happening also as we look at these. All of these stories are, I'm making the mistake that you monsters made, and it's almost like I'm trying to explain the accident. But of course, we are all getting at what happened with his car that led to his death. So of course, all of these are going to have a result in death because of after the crash. Fell asleep, right? Crash, then died. Right? Mechanical failure, right? Then died from crash. Murder and suicide directly explain the death. Anything else we want to consider? Sure. How about things like heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms? And so we'll group those together. Notice we want to have groupings of stories, and so we'll call this internal health failure. Good. Seems like a solid list to me. So now we want to, I'm going to try to be fairly quick, we have a brainstorm list. We could be listing our rivals, just make sure you don't label until you have a good list. And again, I've thought about this case a lot, so it was easy for me to brainstorm a lot of these. For you, more likely you're going to list evidence and keep going back and forth to do more brainstorming. So what do we got? We've got Potter dead. We've got, right, car accident. Oh, sorry, last night. The timing might be important. 3, car accident. Oops. 4, on way home from work. 5, right? Let's see. Crashed through guardrail. I will abbreviate like I'm cool in text messaging. Crashed through guardrail. Now notice, it's important that we also say on freeway. Notice, different sort of case than if this was some little small country road. And then it says rolled down soft bank. And then it says ended in shallow stream. 9, let's see, examined by doctor. 10, no broken bones or external injuries. I think we can put those together. 11, finally, no sign of skidding, swerving. Neat case. All right. We would continue to brainstorm, but again, I've thought about this case a lot, so I think we've got a great list of brainstorm. I'm hoping you're not thinking of anything completely different that doesn't overlap with one of my stories, but that would be great if you're good at this kind of brainstorming. All right, so let's look. What do we think? Because there's no skidding or swerving, I guess suicide could make sense. Falling asleep makes sense. I think a lot of people would say that. a lot of the other things, mechanical failure, a lot of these make a lot of sense. Now, I'm so sorry, you people. I don't see a murder rival being very good. I mean, is there anything in this case that makes you think this is murder? Wouldn't there be a lot easier ways to murder this guy than the way this looks? I mean, what is this? A blow dart through the corner of his eye? Because there's no external injuries, no broken bones. I mean, I guess they could have poisoned him. And so it's the poison that killed him and not the car accident? You seeing where this is going. Just for fun, I'm going to pick what I hear are the most common rivals when I cover this in other classes. Asleep is a common rival. We will say, let's see, driver failure is probably more common than mechanical failure, and that's probably more common than suicide or anything like that. So we'll say driver failure. Again, not fell asleep, but a different sort of driver failure. And then we'll say internal health failure. Those are the most common ones when students look at this case. Why is it the case that Potter's dead? Are the rivals trying to explain that? Of course they are. Why did this occur last night? Why is it the case that his death was at night? Are our rivals trying to explain why this happened at night? Now, notice, driver failure, more likely at night. Falling asleep, more likely at night. But that doesn't mean it explains why this happens at night necessarily. But that hints that this is probably peripheral trace data. So, should we try to explain the timing of this? We should try. Again, might have nothing to do with it, but we should try to see if that is included in our stories. Why is there a car accident? Yes, these stories all explain there being a car accident. Again, not as important as Potter being dead, but very significant trace data. Why did this happen on the way home from work? Are we trying to explain the timing as being after work? This one is right on that margin. If we start to think, okay, is a heart attack more likely after a day of work? Are you more likely to fall asleep at work? In a sense, could our stories have that as a key detail in the story? Sure. Maybe the suicide cases. I mean, that's not one of our rivals, but maybe he just got fired. And so part of the suicide story explains why this happens on the way home from work. So not essential trace data, but trace data. Now, crash through a freeway guardrail. Notice this again. Peripheral style of trace data. If he fell asleep, that could explain him going anywhere, not necessarily through a guardrail, but does a suicide case explain going through a guardrail? Sure, that's where you're going to aim if you're committing suicide. But internal health failure, does that explain it? Well, health failure can explain you crashing anywhere. It can explain you just coming to a rest in the middle of the freeway. But again, something that our story should try to explain. Why does this happen on the freeway? Again, peripheral, but we should try to explain why this happened on the freeway. Could be part of our driver failure stories, falling asleep story if he's going a long way on the freeway. Why is it the case that it rolled down a soft bank? Now this gets strange, because if you're aiming at suicide, you're not going to go down a soft bank. Internal health failure, you're not going anywhere in particular. It's not going to explain that. You could have been anywhere, into a tree, off a cliff, if you have a health failure, or asleep. Not explained. We're not going to be able to explain that, and it doesn't seem like we even have to. Mechanical failure doesn't explain why it goes particularly there. It could have gone anywhere. So this is very much one of those borderline cases where we could say, well, falling asleep, internal health failure explains going off the road, but particularly down a soft bank, that one is rough, but probably NTD. Ended in a shallow stream. Again, we don't have none of our stories are going to directly explain that. Examined by a doctor. Are we trying to explain why he was examined by a doctor? No. Why is he examined by a doctor? Let's answer that question. Because he's dead. And the only people in the United States that have guaranteed health care are dead people if they died in a mysterious way. You get the quality health care. Screw you people in the working classes. never mind. Sorry. Political discussion. Why is it the case that there are no broken bones or external injuries? Is this something we should try to explain? Absolutely. Notice, a lot of these stories are going to have a hard time explaining that, but we do see the importance that when we're thinking of what these stories sound like, we've got to consider that this is part of the story, and it's a mysterious part of the story, so we better explain it. Why are there no signs of skidding and swerving? Again, not the central piece of evidence, but significant trace data. Got it. All right. So, our ranking. So let's talk about these pretty quickly so you're not doing this all day. Let's just talk about falling asleep, and we'll see where we go. Falling asleep. Can that explain Potter's death? Not really. Sorry. You want to know how hardcore I am? I fell asleep last night, and I'm alive, suckers. Falling asleep doesn't cause you to die unless there's other circumstances in falling asleep, such as driving off a cliff. But we don't have that. We don't have him going into the ocean. It says a shallow stream. Now, the only trick here is this, and damn, this reporter or the journalist who wrote this story rolled down a soft bank. See what's happening? Does rolled mean rolled down a soft bank? Or does roll mean action superhero, car going end over end, rolling on its hood? It's not clear. But it sounds like ending in a shallow stream, rolled down a soft bank. If the car was upside down, first, the report would have said that. And also, he would have broken bones or external injuries if he's rolling end over end down a soft bank. Get this? So, I'm going to assume rolled means on the wheels. And so, I don't see what killed him. Falling asleep doesn't kill you, so this doesn't explain the death. Falling asleep explains everything else pretty well, or at least automatically explains it, but it doesn't explain the most important piece of trace data. I don't see what killed him. Sleep doesn't kill you, and it doesn't look like the accident explains his death either. Clear. Does not explain the most important piece of trace data very well at all, and not in a likely way. If sleeping killed him, it was because of some internal health failure that was coincidental with the sleep. Can C1 explain? Notice what happened. Our ranking is going to radically change based on what we're doing here. Asleep, I think, is now a third in our rivals. Can falling asleep explain why this happened at night? Very well. Can it explain a car accident? Yes. Sleeping people suck at driving. Can it explain why this happened on the way home from work? More likely to happen on the way home from work after a long day. Crash through guardrail on freeway. Asleep can explain crashing anywhere. These other things, do they help or hurt? They don't hurt the sleep story, but what do? They hurt explaining the death. No, now, can this explain no broken bones or external injuries? Not if he's dead. It can explain not being injured because you're not injured when you're sleeping. And if you get in an accident when you're completely asleep, you're less likely to get serious injuries. But again, that means he's not dead. Can it explain no skidding or swerving? Sleeping people don't skid or swerve. Hurt by the NTD doesn't explain the death. Driver failure. Can driver failure explain Potter being dead? No. For the same reasons falling asleep can't. Can it explain the less important trace data? Sure. Doesn't explain why this happened at night, but it doesn't have to. But can explain the car accident, way home from work, and driver failure is fairly common, especially at that time of night after a long day. Get it. Can it explain no broken bones, external injuries, no sign of skidding or swerving? Can explain the skidding or swerving, but can't explain why there's no broken bones or external injuries if this is so significant that he's dead. Do you get it? Helped or hurt by the NTD? hurt, you would say, because these don't sound like tragic things that would lead to death just because he missed a turd. Clear? Good. Internal health failure. Can that explain Potter being dead? Yes. The most common cause of death in the world, so this is very likely. Can it explain the trace data? At night. More likely these things happen at night. Can it explain a car accident? Sure. People having a heart attack or being dead of a heart attack suck at driving even more than sleepy people do. Can it explain on the way home from work? Helps in this sense. It can explain that. Through guardrail, yes, dead people might go anywhere. On freeway, dead people could be anywhere. Down a soft bank shallow stream, again, could have been anywhere. These do not help or hurt, but they do help because they hurt all the other rivals that think the accident is what killed them. No broken bones or external injuries explains that perfectly well, because the accident didn't kill him, the heart attack, stroke, or aneurysm did. No sign of skidding or swerving. Dead people don't get their swerve on. Right? Sorry, I know that's not what that means. Do we get it? Internal health failure goes right to the top. Much better rival than any of the others. They can't explain the most important piece of trace data. So, probably need to start considering suicide, murder, much less likely than internal health failure. Ding, ding, ding. We've probably got this case solved. Now you do the autopsy and you see if there are internal signs of acid buildup that is a sign of heart attacks. You do MRI, see if there's a blood clot, and you could quickly get to the bottom of this. And notice, just doing the logical work, we have ruled out other causes, and now we've just got a few to look at, and now an autopsy should solve it pretty cleanly. Next one. Again, trying to go fast. Sorry. Fake story, not a real story. So stop being bullies and pick it on me. Okay, here we go. Make sure you've tried this on your own first. I woke up in a puddle this morning. I didn't do anything unusual last night. I went to bed pretty early after snacking on some watermelon. I did have a slightly unusual dream though. I dreamt about surfing in Kauai. This was a little weird because I haven't been to Hawaii since I was 16, and all of my more recent surfing dreams are about my favorite cold water break in Baja. Baja, Mexico, of course. Good. What is the IQ? Pretty straightforward. Why did I wake in a puddle? In this case, we'll go in the opposite order. I'll list all the evidence, then we'll brainstorm, and then we'll come back and do the labeling. Again, the only thing that's important is have rivals brainstorm before you label. So, what do we got? Woke in puddle. Oops. Let's see. Normal night. 3. Bed early. 4. Snacked on watermelon. Oops, sorry. Before bed. 5. Let's see. Unusual dream. And what do we say? Dreamt of surfing in Kauai. Dreamt of surfing in Kauai. Right? 7. Let's think. Now it says it's unusual, and so then we say haven't been to Hawaii since age 16. 8. Let's think. More recent dreams are of my favorite cold water break in Baja. So now we've got an explanation for why this dream was unusual. Oops, misspelled Hawaii. Sorry, Hawaiians. Good. All right. So now we have to brainstorm. So now what do we have? Now notice, here's something that happens. Because of the weird taboos of American society, there are tons of euphemisms for going to the bathroom and sex. In this case, we're going to run into all the problems with euphemisms for going to the bathroom. So watch for them. Even that, going to the bathroom is a euphemism for urinating. You don't go to the bathroom. That's just going into a room. Fine, all euphemistic. All right. So what do we have? Of course, we have peed bed. Yes, I know that's what you're thinking of, you big jerks. Then we could say spilled watermelon. Good. Maybe I left the watermelon near me on the bed and spilled it. Let's think. What else could explain this? Now notice we're running into another euphemism. I start writing leak, and you're thinking, take a leak. You already said that. No. This could be a leaky roof, a leaky, window, leaky waterbed. Now notice, all we'd have to ask to rule that out is, do I have a waterbed? And I don't, but we don't know that yet. Let's think. What else do we got? We could have, this could be, I'm incredibly sweaty. Oh, if you know me, and we would have to add this in here. Let's add it right here. We could add 9. Jeff is a huge drooler. Oh, sorry. Huge drooler. When I have bad hay fever allergies and I'm stuffed up, oh my gosh, you could wring out my pillow like it's a sponge in the morning. So we could call this drool. Now notice, of course, it would help if it said the puddle was on the pillow. It didn't make that distinction. So that gets a little tricky. That seems pretty good. Oh, nope. Could be also someone poured water or spilled water. That could be it, right? Maybe one of my kids did or my wife did or something like this. Gosh, you creepy people. Maybe wifey peed. No, I'm not even writing that. You guys, no. Now, when my kids were little, if you are a really high metabolism person like me that is just radiating heat all the time, I'm always hot. If your kids, when they're little, get into bed with you, this is like when the dogs get in bed, they sleep right next to me for the warmth. And so, when my kids were toddlers, little, right, did they pee on me? Yes. Those diapers are just for show, right? This would happen because they'd be pressed up against me in their sleep. Oh my gosh. Dads have it easy except when they're asleep. All right. So I guess we can put, right, kids peed, right? Fine. If whatever pleases you. Breads and circuses, right? All right. Seems like a good list of rivals, so now we can label our evidence. Why is it the case that I woke in a puddle? Absolutely important trace data. Why is it the case that I had a normal night? Now notice, it didn't say I had a weird night, it said a normal night, so there's really no mystery there. Are we trying to explain why I had a normal night? No, none of these things would constitute a normal night. That is background. We are not trying to explain a normal night. We're trying to explain the weird puddle thing. Why is it the case I went to bed early? Now maybe that gets a little tricky because you can see it could be related. But notice, we could ask the question and answer it. Why is it the case Jeff went to bed early? Because Jeff's a nerd. Jeff wakes up early, goes to bed early because he's not exciting. This is not something we are trying to explain. Why is it the case that I snacked on watermelon before bed? Because watermelon tastes great? We don't need to explain that. Could it be relevant? Yes, but we're not trying to explain it. It's important NTD. Why is it the case that I had an unusual dream? Now notice, these aren't in the rivals, but the mere fact that it says unusual makes me think this is likely to be trace data. It's a correlation. This weird puddle happened, weird dream happened, they overlap in time, so we should try to explain that correlation of two events. Good? Dreamt of surfing in Kauai. Now notice, Unusual dream is a trace signaler telling us that we should try to explain this dream. Can you usually explain dreams? No, they're not supposed to be explained. Sorry, if you have the theory of dreams that I do. Your dreams are your unconscious working out things behind your back. If you understood them, they wouldn't work. They're supposed to help you deal with your sexual frustration or aggression or alienation behind your back so you can go on with life and not want to kill people or quit your job because you got to pay for your iPhones. And okay, I'm getting too far. Sorry. Thanks, Brom. Haven't been to Hawaii since I was 16. We were told that's unusual, so we should try to explain it. My more recent dreams are of my favorite cold water break in Baja. Are we trying to explain my normal dreams? No, they are normal. Why do I have recent dreams about my cold water break in Baja? Because those make me so happy. Surfing was so fun. All right. Jeff is a huge drooler. MTD. We are not trying to explain why he's a huge drooler. Our rivals do not say he's congested. He's a loser. Right? No. Right? MTD. All right. So now, let's do the work. Let's decide on our rivals. Of course, you are going to want me to articulate this one. Give the people what they want. Car crashes and nudity. He peed the bed. Good? C2. What seems good here? Spilled watermelon seems good. That seems solid. I left the bowl near the bed, maybe even on the bed, and fell asleep and it spilled. Seems pretty good. Now notice, I'm reporting this case, and so I would know if it's drool. That would have been an obvious thing. The reporter was there, and it would have said, why did I wake up in my own drool? Probably. So let's go with sweaty as another rival. Again, probably others that are just as good, of course. Again, if I had a waterbed, solid. If we knew it was rainy, right? If we had that as part of the NTD, then leaky roof or window would probably climb up in terms of likelihood. We'll go with these. Again, let's talk it through so this doesn't take hours. Most important piece of trace data. Do I have to do this one first? Yes, I have to do this one first. Can Jeff peeing the bed explain waking up in a puddle? Well, but not likely, you little punks. Good? Can peeing explain a puddle? Sure it can. That's what happens when you pee in your sleep. Is this likely? No. Not likely that I pee the bed. I am not young enough or old enough to be peeing the bed. So, very unlikely explanation for the most important trace data. But let's follow it up. Can it explain the trace data? Yes. I think you have the MO that says that what happens to us in our sleep does make it into our dreams because our unconscious mind is trying to keep us asleep. It wants to keep us asleep so it can do its work. And so it will make distractions part of the dream so you won't wake up. So if I peed the bed, it would make sense that I would have what? A warm water dream of surfing so that I'm not waking up when I'm drenched in my own hot urine. Oh my gosh, give the people what they want. Explains the trace data very well. But again, this trace data is not as important as the puddle, but explains the trace data well. In a likely way, no, explaining dreams is never likely, but it can explain it. Good. Is it helped or hurt by the NTD? Here's where we get more backing of this rival that you love so much. Helped by a normal night? Neither helped nor hurt. Helped by going to bed early? 3? Helped. More time with a full bladder because snacked on watermelon. What does watermelon have a lot of? Water. Really helped by 3 and 4. Good. Is it helped or hurt by the NTD? Not helped or hurt by my being a huge drooler, but notice helped by the unusual dream, and that is helped by this idea that the cold water is an interesting differentiation of this unusual dream. A nice little trace signaler here too. Do you get it? Sorry, I didn't beat the bed, but it has great help by the NTD, and it explains the peripheral trace data very well. So very quickly, spilled watermelon, can it explain the trace data? Yes, it can. Can it explain it in a likely way? I guess not super likely. Would I leave a dish of watermelon on my bed and go to sleep? Not very likely, but it can do the trick. Can it explain the surfing? Well, it can explain the unusual dream of one water surfing, but watermelon is probably cold. But still, if I'm soaked and I need to stay asleep, I will include my being soaked in my dream. So that can explain that a little bit. Helped by the NTD? Not helped by the normal night. Not really helped by going to bed early. Going to bed early means I'm not exhausted, like falling asleep, and so would be more careless with watermelon. Snacking on the watermelon clearly helps. That gives the occasion. The rest of this doesn't really have an effect. And this even hurts a little bit, because you would think I would dream of cold water if I spilled cold watermelon. That's not going to be warm like pee-pee is. Do I have to? Sweaty. Can this explain waking in a puddle? Not very easily. I mean, if we're talking puddle is the language of not just being soaked, but being a water in a certain spot that's a little deep, right? Where sweat, you would say, I'm soaked from head to toe, or my PJs are soaked, not puddle. So it doesn't explain that very well. And so in that sense, it's not very likely. But no, it is helped by the trace data, right? Warm, I'm sweaty, good. So it does explain this little peripheral trace data about the dream pretty well. Good. Helped or hurt by NTD? Mixed. Hurt by a normal night. Doesn't say I'm sick, doesn't say I'm super hot and sweaty. Go to bed early, unless it's super hot, and so I'm in bed too long and I get more sweaty. Hard to say. Snacking on watermelon would tend to bring down your temperature, so that hurts a little bit. Although you're more likely to eat watermelon in hot temperatures, so you could say the occasion might help a little bit. Cold water dreams, again, that does help a little, because now the warm water, again, is significant because I'm sweaty. Me being a drooler doesn't help or hurt. That just helps the drool rival that we didn't really consider as being very strong. Got it? Got it. Finally, lawn sculpture, true story. Really, this is true. While working in my office at UC Riverside, wifey called me with the news that someone had taken a large duke on the lawn. Sorry, that's what we call doo-doo in our house. Sorry, I know you're reading these and you go right from pee to poo and you think I'm either immature or I have some weird fetish. I don't, right? These are just funny. Okay, true story though. Someone had taken a large duke on the lawn in front of our duplex in the family housing on campus. Notice that's testimony and arrival. After cleaning it up that night, to my horror, the same thing happened the next day and the next. The pile was even in the same spot. The only difference was that the toilet paper with the specimen was different colors. Some of you right now are saying, what do you mean there's toilet paper in different colors? There's not, because that's bad for women. Good? Well, they used to make toilet paper in different colors, and if you're poor, like I was at this time while I was working on my PhD at UC Riverside, really poor, the really ghetto grocery stores sell that stuff really cheap. They should take it off the shelves because it's harmful, but it's still there, and they can sell it really cheap, so they do. So if any of you have been faced with colored toilet paper in your life, you lived like we did. Good? All right, sorry. Fun days, but we were poor. I racked my brain, but unlike at C&M, I couldn't think of a single one of my UCR students that hated me. I really did. When this happened, I looked through all my rosters of the past and current semesters and thought, did anybody get a bad grade or did they hate me? And I couldn't find any. I couldn't find any that I gave them a bad grade or they didn't seem to like me or whatever. Now, if that happened now, I could think, yeah, last semester that one person didn't like me. But it's still not very common. People are so nice to me. All right, but anyway, I really racked my brain for that. So here we go. What is the IQ? Pretty easy. Why is there... What do you say? This is hard to conjugate. Why is there dukes, see the conjugation, on my lawn again and again? Notice. Clear. We are trying to explain why there is dookie on my lawn. Clear. Let's list the evidence, so we are good at this. So this is while at UCR. This is wifey called with news. And notice this is testimony, so I'm going to put it in quotes. Wifey says, not wiki, wifey says, someone duked on our lawn. Okay, sorry about more conjugation problems with that noun. What do we got in front of duplex? Shoot. What do we got now in fam housing on campus? What do we got? I cleaned it up. And to be careful, we'll say that night. Good. And then we'll say happened again and again. 8, right? And now let's say in same spot, right? This is a true story. It really was the exact same spot. And it was in the middle of the front of our house, like the middle of the lawn. Not like under a tree or something, which would make a little more sense. And now what do we say? Different color TP. Good. 10. And then we would say, I don't think any students hate me. Good? All right, we've got this. So now, again, I'm going to try to go a little quick. We got all our evidence, brainstorm rivals. And so maybe I just don't realize it, but this is a hate crime. And so it could be a hate crime of students. Maybe it's like a colleague. Maybe this is wifey. Good, fine, right? So this is purposely mean. Good? So this is a hate crime directed at me. That's what I thought first. Then I thought maybe it's a prank. Maybe these are my friends or some students that are doing this, and they just don't understand. They don't have a conscience for pranks. Funny prank, but way too mean. Especially if I'm cleaning it up. That's more like a hate crime. What else? What about a bunch of vagrant stories? Right? This is a homeless person or some kind of a nutcase, and they're pooing on my lawn in the middle of the night. Although, notice, seems to be happening in the daytime if you're putting this together. But that's got to be implied. Maybe I go off to work and I don't realize the poo is there when I leave for work, and I only notice when I come home from work. Maybe. I don't remember the detail there. I couldn't tell you for sure. What else could we say? We could say it's an animal, but that gets really weird, right? Because there's toilet paper. So how about a pet with a neurotic owner that wipes its little bottom with neurotic owner that uses TP on their pet? Let's think. What else? I think those are the most common rivals I usually see or hear. I guess we could do it because I forgot it on the last time. Maybe this is a sleepwalking story. It's not a hate crime. It's not a prank. It's just me or somebody, wifey or somebody in the neighborhood is sleepwalking. Now, maybe that could be called a vagrant story. So we've got to watch out for that kind of overlap. But I think we could consider sleep pooing. So stupid. Sorry. I don't know why I said that. Good. Aren't those all the... Yeah, we could imagine many more, but let's go with those. Okay, now, here we go. What we will say the hate crime. Good. We will say prank. And then what? I guess vagrant is pretty great. By the way, this is a real case, and you will not solve it. If I was you, I just dared you to solve this because I know you won't. I solved this after the third night. I solved it with the information you have, although I got one more piece of information because I had a new rival that I thought of. I want to see if you think of this rival before we're finishing this. So if you want, pause the video, try to come up with a new rival that will help you solve this like I did. All right, so let's try. Again, after we brainstormed our rivals, then we can go back and label evidence. Why is this the case that this happened while I worked at UCR? That's right on that borderline as well. If you think this really could be colleagues or students, then this can explain why this happens while I'm working there. I don't think those are very serious rivals, really. So I could totally forgive, depending on what your rivals are. This could be either trace data or non-trace data. But again, I will be able to tell by the rivals you think are serious. If you think a student hate crime is serious, then that becomes trace data. You can explain that this occurs because I'm teaching at that place. Good? Wifey calls with the news. Now, unless we're taking wifey prank stories seriously, should we? Should we think that wifey is secretly pranking me? She goes out, dukes on her lawn, and then calls me to watch me clean it up. Maybe takes pictures of it and sends it to our friends, right? Maybe her and her friends are together in this. Okay, I'm getting too far along in this. Very unlikely that we can explain why wifey called me, or what I'm trying to say is we know why wifey called. There's Duke on the lawn. Husbands aren't good for very much, but they are good for stuff like this. Unless you consider wifey did this, wifey sleepwalking. Oh, even then, if she sleepwalked, she would still be calling, not because she did it, but only if it's a wifey prank would this explain why wifey called. Otherwise, wifey called because there's Dukes on the lawn, right? If there was Dukes on my lawn, I'd call my wife. She's going to call me. Good? Wifey says, so now we've got the testimony, someone duked on the lawn. Oops, you notice what's going on here, right? Is we've got to be careful. I almost really screwed up. Notice? Because there's actually two pieces of evidence there. And so we need to be careful and separate them. The fact of Dukes on my lawn needs to be separated from her theory that someone duked on the lawn. Why does wifey think someone duked on the lawn? Because there's Duke on the lawn. We're not trying to explain why she thinks that, right? Now, it could be a rival. Someone duked on her lawn, and we're looking at that. But notice, the fact that there are Dukes on the lawn, we don't want to forget that. So the fact that I'm treating this as testimony, I still need to make sure I put the presence of Dukes, and this is the most important piece of trace data. So, could have made a mistake there. Why is it the case the Dookie is in front of our duplex? Seems like we should explain that. And that's what a lot of these rivals are trying to do, like the prank and the hate crime. While I'm living at family housing on campus, again, this is right on that boundary. Was it directed at family housing on campus, or is it just because I'm where I lived? For most cases, this will be NTD. Again, unless you think there's something weird that's particular to this case in your rivals. I cleaned it up that night. Are our rivals trying to explain me cleaning it up? Again, if you take wifey's doing this on purpose to me as a kind of hate crime / prank, otherwise, of course I cleaned it up. You don't leave Duke on your lawn, right? Especially when there's little kids everywhere, as we talked about with the turtle story. It happened again and again. Notice, is that trace data? Absolutely. We have got to explain this happening again. It's so obvious that that's central trace data, it's even in the wording of the IQ. Notice, that was so crazy. I even put it in the IQ. Didn't have to, but we can see how important that is. In the same spot, yes, we, central trace data, have to explain why it's in the same spot. Different colored toilet paper. Yes, we should explain that. Maybe we don't have to. Maybe there's some vagrant story where just get whatever toilet paper you can. That's what vagrant do. Sorry. But we should try to explain different color toilet paper, right? I don't know if we can, but we should try. I don't think any students hate me. That is not what our rivals are trying to explain, why I don't know that they hate me, but non-trace data, background information. Got it? Okay. Now, for purposes of time, let's look at hate crime, right? I don't think we'll look at all of these. Can a hate crime explain the most important piece of trace data? Notice it's down here in 11, Duke's on my lawn. Yes. Can it explain it in a likely way? No, right? I mean, that's not really MO of a hate crime. I mean, the burning bag of doo-doo is hate crime. The throw doo-doo at a house is hate crime. Putting it in the middle of the lawn is hate crime? Not a very likely hate crime scenario, but I guess it can explain it. I mean, maybe none of this is very likely. Can it explain the other trace data? In front of duplex, kind of. Good. Out on the lawn, though, not really hate crime sort of MO. In same spot, different colored toilet paper. More prank sort of thing. I mean, maybe there's a message being sent with the different colored toilet paper. Maybe it's the colors of the flags of Northern Ireland or something, right? And I'm just not getting this is a serial pooper case or something. Again, pretty far-fetched stuff. Not very likely, but possible. Still in consideration. Not explained clearly or likely. Helped by the NTD, just that it's in front of my house, right? Did they know that I would clean it up? Right? That doesn't really help or hurt. It's hurt by students don't hate me. I mean, college students are the age group for this kind of hate crime. That's not something you do if you're any older than that. So, hurts a little the fact that I seem to have only people that like me when I'm teaching at the time. Wifey called with news, doesn't help or hurt. Good. Going through. Let's, for purposes of time, talk just about vagrant, and then let me solve this case. Vagrant. Can it explain Duke online? Yes, it can. Vagrant might go poop anywhere, but the middle of the lawn, that's not a very good story. We're going to go for a bush or a tree or behind a shed. Not really the MO of vagrant pooping. Not a drunk person maybe pooping. Not in the middle of the lawn. That's just not a good story. I mean, not a pleasant story, but not a likely story. Can it explain the TD? I don't know. Doesn't seem like a prime spot. I mean, again, if there was a cute little shady area great for pooping, then it would make sense. Middle of the lawn, that's just weird, right? We've got a really neurotic, right, some kind of pathological vagrant. A different color toilet paper. Maybe the vagrant can explain that a little better than the other rivals. So far it seems random, but maybe you just get TP wherever you can. Again, most important, Duke's on lawn. Not a great clear story. Not very likely. Helped or hurt by the NTD. Let's see. Doesn't really do anything. Right? The NTD doesn't really help or hurt. The serial nature of this vagrant, again, really odd story. Notice. If you were talking about a big array of stories, all the stories that could explain this, notice how tiny this story is getting. This is a vagrant that doesn't want privacy, that is not worried about being caught, that Duke's in the same spot 3 nights in a row. I mean, this is just getting to be such a minute and unlikely story. It's possible, but unlikely when we look at all the evidence. Clear? All right. Did you think of the other rival? Here was the real case. Oh, sorry. Back. How would I rank these? I really don't know. I think prank would be first, and we could articulate that, and I think you know how to do this now. Hate crime, that's a little weird. I don't know. I mean, these are all pretty even. There's no far and away incredible divergence of ranking here. Pretty random ranking. I would have to think about it a while. But again, the credit goes because of your articulation of the evidence, handling the evidence well, articulating it clearly. Clear? All right. Here's what I did. One more piece of evidence was gathered because of a rival I thought of. What did I do? Right? I went to the next door neighbor. Remember, it's a duplex, so we're connected to our next door neighbor. Really sweet couple. Cynthia answers the door, and I ask Cynthia, what color toilet paper are you using? Now notice. And here's what happened. The neighbor said, I can't believe she answered the question, right? Neighbor said, had pink TP until yesterday, now blue, I think she said. Again, if your neighbor knocks on your door and asks you what color toilet paper, he better be a philosophy professor or I guess an art major, or you are not going to answer. Now, she knew me really well, so she was like, yeah, that's just Jeff. That's just how he is. That's something he would ask. I think I explained it a little bit. But anyway, what did I find out? This. And that made me investigate the memory. And what did I notice? The toilet paper was yellow, pink, blue, and white. What color toilet paper did we have? Yellow and white. Our neighbors had pink and blue, right? They were also poor, shopping at the same store as we did. Case solved. What was it? Plumbing issue. This is insane. What happened is there was a clog in the plumbing that went under the lawn that came from our two houses, and there was a crack in the juncture of the two pipes that lead out to this under the street to the sewer. So what would happen is normal things like pee would just soak into the ground. But if you flushed a dookie, it would build up the pressure and the dookie would pop up onto the grass. It was pretty ruckus looking grass. But the dukes would pop up with the toilet paper combined with it like it was paper mache, and worse paper mache than your kids ever brought home. And it would just pop up and sit there, and the water from the flush would go back into the ground. So it would look like it was just poo covered in toilet paper. And so after the third day, I realized that this was a plumbing problem. And luckily, this is family housing, so I didn't have to pay for fixing it. That's what it was. Crazy story. All right. Sorry that took so long. I hope you can do this well. Thanks. Bye.